Hello there. It is me, the TheDuelLogs. So here we go. This is a tier list. We're going over going second tier list. Follow the Hermerex. I have 8,000 followers on Twitch. What is this called? Twitter? So going second cards are cards which equalize the board when you're going second. Usually they allow you to win against unbreakable boards like Baron and Borreload's Savage Dragon. So, which one of these are the best? First up, we have, what is this called? Sphere mode? Sphere mode allows you to tribute 3 of your opponent's monsters in order to summon it to your opponent's side of the field. All you have to do is give up your normal summon and you get rid of 3 cards. However, there are not a lot of decks that end on 3 cards, surprisingly. You would think the game is so combo heavy, there's so many combos everywhere that of course they're gonna end on like 5 cards, but it's every time I main deck Sphere mode, my opponents end on 2 cards without fail. Never 3. So it doesn't come up as much, but it is the ultimate board breaker. Yeah, it needs 3 cards. That should be a benefit, but it's just like most boards only end up on 2. And it does take up your normal summon, and it's dead in hand most of the time. It's pretty meta dependent. Solid B or A? Exactly, that's what I was thinking. I'll put it in A. It's pretty good. Maybe B. Maybe A. No, I'll put it in B. I wouldn't main deck it, but I probably would side deck it. Gigantic Splight and Tier end on 5. Okay, we can put it in A for now then. Based sphere modes. Okay, we'll go over to Lava Golem next. Lava Golem also eats up your normal summon and gets rid of 2. It's basically sphere mode, but for only 2 cards. I'll put it in B tier. It's not as useful for some reason. It still sees play. It's pretty good. S tier? Are you crazy? It only eats 2 monsters. Every time I play Lava Golem, my opponents end on either 1 card or 5. And there's never anything in between. I swear that the moment you play Lava Golem, your opponent only is going to play a Towers deck, or they're playing like a deck that brings out 5 cards. Lava's honestly better than Spears, then you're just unlucky. Yeah, that's true. We'll put him on A tier along with Spears. How about that? Next up, we have Raigeki, the ultimate board breaker. It's just pure advantage. Raigeki destroys all of your opponent's monsters with no cost. That's B. It's alright. Lightning Storm. Ooh, Lightning Storm. This one's good. It has the effect where if you control no cards, you can either destroy all your opponent's attack position monsters or all of your opponent's spell and trap cards. And because this card is versatile, where you can pick monsters or spell traps, it's one of the best going second cards in the game because it's never dead against any matchup. And the versatility of it, the thing is, like, it's live against all matchups, and also its effect is really good. Like in Magic the Gathering, they have lots of cards like this called like model cards, where they let you choose one of its effects. They're a lot more versatile, and usually because they're versatile, they have like extra costs associated to them in some way. And the only cost this card has is you just can't have any cards on face up on your side of the field, which is enough of a detriment where it's not main decked. Because it's purely a going second tool. You can't use it if you're established. You can't use it going first, obviously. But it's definitely S tier. It's so good. I love this card. This card is my colleague. Next up, we have Evenly Matched. Fun fact. If you go online and you type in what are the best going second cards, all of the lists put Evenly Matched in number 1. S tier easily? Here's the thing about Evenly Matched. Evenly Matched just gets negated. It's like... it's just immediately negated every time you use it. I mean, so is Lightning Storm, but Evenly Matched, like even more so. I can't remember the last time I resolved this card. Yeah, it baits a negate for sure, but you know, if they have like 3 negates, then you're just gonna waste 1 on Evenly Matched. It is really good, I'll give you that, but I'm not sure if it's S tier along with Lightning Storm, because you also have to give up your battle phase for it. It beats Eldritch instantly. It does, but other decks can just negate it no problem. Like, just because a card can get negated doesn't mean it's bad. But this one, it also gives up your battle phase too. It is really good. I'm just basically debating if it should be S tier or not. It's still one of the best going second cards in the game. I probably would put it above these guys, but not S tier. Not yet. Then we have Harpy's Feather Duster. This card was banned. It has the effect to destroy all your opponent's spell and trap cards. That's pretty good. We'll put it in C tier. I don't know if it's better than... because here's the thing. Most decks don't play spell traps. So if you hit it with Harpy's Feather Duster, it's not really going to do anything. It's like a side deck card. We'll put it in C tier. It's all right. Like, you can just play Lightning Storm instead. Lightning Storm kind of removes the need to play Harpy's Feather Duster. The reason Raigeki is a little bit higher is because people play monsters almost exclusively. This card's almost always usable. People don't really play spell traps though. However, spell traps don't really float like monsters do. Raigeki, the reason Raigeki has fallen out of favor is because pretty much everyone and their mom floats into something else or has destruction immunity, whereas spell traps don't really have that problem. So if you resolve Harpy's Feather Duster, unless your opponent negates the effect, you're probably going to blow up their whole back row. Whereas if you use Raigeki, you might only slow down your opponent a little bit. It's not a guaranteed board wipe, but it is more useful than Harpy's Feather Duster. But, I mean, it's still all of your opponent's back row for one card. We'll put it in B tier, I guess. Next up, we have Red Reboot. This is S tier. Instant win against traps. Negate one trap card, and also your opponent gets to add a trap card from their deck to their side of the field. And the trap card you negate is not sent to the graveyard, it just gets flipped back down. But your opponent can't activate traps for the rest of the turn. And if you pay half your life points, you can activate it from your hand, and it's spell speed 3 because it's a counter trap. So it's just an easy win if your opponent is playing any trap cards. If your opponent's not playing a trap deck, then it's obviously not useful, but this card single-handedly just removes trap-based decks from the meta. Yeah, it's really good. It just counters a full archetype of cards. Nobody plays spell traps. I mean, it's more of a... You can't negate Red Reboot as easily as you can negate Harpy's Feather Duster. That's the thing. Like, if you activate Harpy's Feather Duster and your opponent's playing a trap-heavy deck, there's a good chance they're probably going to be able to stop it. Whereas Red Reboot, you can just kind of power through your opponent's back row and just negate, like, their negate. If they have a counter trap to negate your stuff, you can just chain Red Reboot to that counter trap to stop it. And chances are they won't have a second one. And then they'll be locked out of their whole back row for the turn. Surprisingly, like, you would think it would be better because they both basically do the same thing, but it's not. Yeah, because the thing with Red Reboot, you can just save it. You don't have to use it right away. You just basically save it for when your opponent chooses to activate one of their cards, and then you just blow through their whole back row for a turn. Next up, we have Visuda. Ooh, this is an easy S tier. I'm not even going to explain why. Maybe I should. So, it's a joke. It's more of a D tier going second card, but if we're trying to make jokes, we put it in S tier. What it does is basically allows you to bounce one of your opponent's cards, but without losing card advantage. So you special summon it from the hand, you go into Monk of the Tenyi, then you use its graveyard effect to bounce one of your opponent's cards. And essentially you go +1 in card advantage in the exchange. And it does bounce anything, so it also bounces Floodgates. It was the out of Floodgates before Dracoback. I guess Dracoback probably should have been on the list too. But the problem is you need a clear field in order to use it. And that's it. So if you have any kind of extenders, you can't do it. And also if you want to, like, Monk of the Tenyi is a non-effect monster, which kind of screws with a whole bunch of strategies because most good extra deck monsters require effect monsters specifically as a material. And there's no easy way to convert it into something else. Next up, we have Maxi. I guess it's S tier. Next up, we have Forbidden Droplets, another S tier. So, Forbidden Droplets send any amount of cards from your hand or field to the graveyard, then negate the effects of that many cards your opponent controls, monsters, and have their attacks. And also, your opponent can't respond to this card based on the types of cards you send to the graveyard. So it's basically spell speed 4, negates without targeting your opponent's cards. It's one of the ultimate board breakers. And also, it doesn't lock you out of dealing damage that turn. The only problem is it requires a lot of resources to use. So some meta decks can't afford the cost. But if you can, then this card is amazing. I hate the term spell speed 4. I love the term spell speed 4. I would marry spell speed 4 if I could. Next up, we have Triple Tactics Talent. If your opponent activates a monster effect during your turn, then you can use this card to either draw 2 cards, rip 1 card from your opponent's hand, or steal one of your opponent's monsters. And all 3 of those effects are good, especially drawing 2 cards and or looking at your opponent's hand and getting rid of 1 card from their hand. The problem is that I never get to actually use this card. Every time I draw into it, my opponent doesn't play hand traps. So it just never resolves. Or if they do play hand traps, they save it for the 1 card that I can't afford to have hand trapped. So just looking at my opponent's hand after the fact doesn't really do shit. Or just drawing 2 cards isn't going to do anything because, like, you know, they already stopped my combo and I literally can't extend no matter what I draw into. Like, every time I draw into this, like, in theory, it's an S tier card, but in practice, it never works for me. So I'm putting it in A tier because of that. You guys can cry about it. Next up, we have Nibiru. I'm not sure why I have hand traps in here. Like, hand traps, I guess they're going second cards. Tactics is a turn 1 card. Oh, I guess it's also a turn 1 card, huh? I'll put Nibiru in S tier as well, because it can just win you games on its own. And it's a lot harder to negate than other hand traps because it can't be called by. So, for those of you who don't know, it has the effect where if your opponent summons 5 or more times, you contribute all cards, face-up cards in the field, and give him a token. Yeah, where's Santa Claus? At your mom's house. Next up, we have the Kaiju, who's not the lowest attack points. We'll put this one in C tier because he has high attack points. Then we have the Sticky String Kaiju. This one has the second lowest attack points, which is good for Kaijus where you're just tributing your opponent's monster to get rid of boss monsters. We'll put the Sticky String Kaiju in B tier. Next up, we have Tsukiyomi. This is a spirit monster, which requires your normal summon in order to flip one monster on the field face down. This card used to be busted back in the day when people still played flip effect monsters. It was also good for flipping like Summon Skull face down. It was even played all the way into the Dragon Ruler format. It's not very good anymore. Your normal summon, it can't be special summoned. It returns to your hand during the end phase. Next up, we have, the Mystery Dust Kaiju. See, this one sees lots of play because it's a wind kaiju, so it can be used under a barrier statue. So we'll put this one in A tier. Excellent kaiju. Next up, we have Mind Control. Mind Control allows you to steal one of your opponent's monsters. However, it can't attack or be tributed. But you can link it away and use its effect, because I don't think it negates the effect. It's pretty good. We'll put it in B tier. Next up, we have Cyphrine Gear Gamma. If you control no monsters and your opponent activates a monster effect, you can negate the effect, special summon this card, destroy that card, and special summon Driver. It's a hand trap that requires you to play a Garnet in your main deck, but it's also a hand trap that does the ever important thing of actually destroying the card that it negates. Most of the other hand traps do not destroy the card, they simply negate the effects. Or if they destroy, they don't negate, like in the case of Ghost Ogre. So that makes Gamma actually very good. Like, maybe S tier good. It's pretty damn good. Even if you have to play Garnet, people will play it because of the effect. It can give you a Chaos Ruler, that's true. Next up, we have Change of Heart. Steal one of your opponent's cards for a turn for no cost. We'll put it in B tier next to Mind Control. Next up, we have Twin Twisters. Discard one card from your hand, destroy 2 of your opponent's cards. Not as good as Harpy's Feather Duster. We'll put it in C tier. Next up, we have Super Polymerization. Discard one card from your hand, fuse 2 cards on both players' side of the field, and spell speed 4, your opponent can't respond to it. It's an easy S tier. It's so good that I'm surprised it's not limited in the TCG in any way. Flew last Super Poly. Yeah, the biggest downside of Super Poly is there's some decks where it just doesn't really do shit against. However, they did recently release a new card, which makes it a lot more alive. There's basically a card which is the opposite of Mud Dragon of the Swamp, which allows you to actually fuse pretty much everything. Yeah, that'd be great. I mean, they know Super Poly exists. That's why they don't let you do that. Like with Guardian Chimera, they're like, any 3 effect monsters? They're like, how about specify any 3 effect monsters that you control only? Next up, we have a Kaiju with 3,300 attack. Kind of not as good as the other ones with lower attack. We'll put it in D tier. Dark Hole. Destroy all monsters on the field. D tier, garbage card. Nobody plays Dark Hole. Why would you play Dark Hole when you can just play Raigeki instead, or Lightning Storm? There's no reason to play Dark Hole. It's D tier, garbage card. Also destroys your own cards too. Who would want to do that? Next up, we have MST. D tier, destroy 1 spell or trap card in the field. Why would you play this when you can play Lightning Storm or Harpy's Feather Duster? Idiots. Next up, we have Dark Ruler No More. A tier. This card would be crazy broken if it allowed you to deal battle damage during the turn you used it. Instead, it does not. So it's not played as much as Forbidden Droplet. So it's A tier. It is very good though. I'll tell you what. Man, MST is so good. It used to be Gamma Seal, the Sea Turtle Kaiju. Easy A tier. One of the most played Kaijus in the game because it has the lowest attack. Next up, we have... you guys probably know what this card is. This is the Archafina Centric. It's a pendulum monster that has the effect where if this card is on the field as a monster, you can tribute the card in order to destroy 1 monster your opponent controls. Or if this card is on the field as a pendulum spell, you can destroy it in order to destroy one of your opponent's spell or trap cards. So it's either a monster destruction or a spell and trap card destruction. And it can be used as either or. It's one of the few versatile cards in the game. However, the reason it's not as used as a going second tool is because its monster version requires your normal summon. You have to spend resources to get it on the field. If this card had a way to special summon itself from the hand outside of, pendulum summoning, it would be really good. But instead, it's just an option for pendulum decks who don't use it because pendulum decks are very combo heavy, where they don't really have room for stuff like Archafina Centric. because they're just trying to do their combo. So all their cards are just dedicated to pulling off that combo. There's no like toolbox pendulum decks. But if there was one, this might be decent in it. So we'll put Archfiend Eccentric in D tier next to MST. Next up, we have Gizmek Kaku. If there's a monster in the extra monster zone, you can special summon this card from the hand, and then you can also absorb it. And you can also special summon monsters that it absorbs. It's really good at getting rid of extra deck monsters in the extra monster zone. However, most people don't use monsters in the extra monster zone anymore, because that's only for link monsters. So we'll put it in C tier. It's not half bad, but it's not played very much, because it's just better options you can do. We have the Eater of Millions. So Eater of Millions has the effect where you can special summon it from your hand by banishing 5 cards face down from your hand, field, or extra deck. Usually you banish 5 cards from your extra deck. Then if it battles a monster, during the damage step, you banish your opponent's monster face down. And it's a hard once per turn. So the way your opponent can beat this card is by attacking it over twice. The first one will get eaten and the second one can't be. But what's great about this is it's non-target removal, because you just attack into your opponent's monster that you want to get rid of, and it removes a monster in literally the best way possible by banishing it face down so it doesn't float. Monsters can't float if they're banished face down. There was a ruling update that made sure that happened. However, it does require 5 cards from your extra deck in order to use. And it's a purely going second tool that only gets rid of 1 card, which can be just destroyed with any form of disruption. Like DPE can stop the card. You can just negate the effect as long as you have an effect which negates activations. You can also stop it with Infinite Impermanence, a niche card at its attack declaration. Even though the effect activates in the damage step, it'll still work. There's just too many outs to it. Like it can be negated. It is a very good form of removal, but you could use up there are just better pot cards that exist that also use up cards from your extra deck. So you can just use like Pot of Prosperity, which banishes 6 from your extra deck in order to excavate the top 6 cards of your deck. I would say probably C tier. B tier doesn't seem good enough for Eater of Millions. There's just too much negates in the game for it. And also the effect of banishing cards from your extra deck, like your extra deck's already so, the space is so limited already. It is really good, but as a going second tool, you could instead use all of these other ones that could wipe your opponent's entire board instead of just playing 1 card to get rid of 1 card, which actually has a pretty decent resource cost to it. Next up, we have another high attack kaiju. We'll put it next to the other high attack kaiju. 3300, cringe. Next up, we have Gizmek Orochi, the Serpentron Sky Slasher. Banish the top 8 cards of your deck, I believe, in order to special summon it from your hand or graveyard. And also, you can banish 3 cards from your extra deck in order to destroy 1 card in the field. And it has a hard once per turn between both of those effects, so you cannot both special summon it and destroy it during the same turn. If you could, this card would be played a lot more. However, as is, you can just special summon it during your opponent's turn because its special summon effect is quick effect for some reason, and then just pop a card during your turn. Yeah, basically like Eater of Millions, good effect, but the cost is actually pretty detrimental to some decks, and it only destroys 1 card. The cost is like, you kind of need your extra deck spots. You kind of don't want to banish your cards unless you're playing Pot of Desire stuff. Alright, next up, we have Alpha, the Master of Beasts. You can special summon this card from your hand if your opponent controls a higher attacks of monsters than you do. You can return a number of beast cards from your side of the field to your hand. Not beast, but like beast-centric cards. Then you can bounce that amount of cards your opponent controls too. So it's non-target bouncing, which is a good form of removal. And it also has 3000 attack. And the effect of special summon itself is not once per turn, but the bounce effect is. So you can special summon this card from your hand, bounce one of your opponent's high priority targets, and then special summon it again and just crash into something else because it's 3000 attack. Good chance you'll be able to destroy something. This is a B tier going second card. It's actually really good. You guys are all saying C tier. You guys are saying D tier. No, Alpha is really good. You guys don't know nothing about nothing because it's a twofer. You can bounce one and then destroy another with its attack. It's an excellent going second card. Next up, I forget this card's name, but it's a going second card. It has the effect where if your opponent controls more monsters than you do, you can special summon it from your hand. It has 2600 attack. Yeah, Guan Yu. And if your opponent controls more monsters than you can destroy one of your opponent's monsters. So it's kind of like Alpha, where it comes out, it can destroy something, and then it can also attack something. And it doesn't use up your normal summon. However, Alpha has more attack points and gets rid of things easier than Guan Yu. It's good, but it's not as good as Alpha. Next up, we have Neospacian Grand Mole. You guys remember this card being limited because it was so good? It was basically like a worse version of Eater of Millions. You normal summon this card. If it battles a monster, you can return it and this card to your hand, so that you can use it again on your next turn. Oh my god. Amazing. You can Kaiju your opponent, bounce your Kaiju with Alpha, and use your Kaiju again. Keck. Exactly. It combos so well with other going second cards. As does Grand Mole, actually. You can just bounce your Kaijus back to your hand. But because of power creep, yeah, it's definitely in D tier. It's not as good as it used to be. Next up, we have Pankratops. Pankratops. So, we have Guan Yu and Alpha, who are basically like Pankratops, where if your opponent controls more monsters than you do, you can special summon this card from your hand. It has 2600 attack, so it can beat over monsters, and it can tribute itself in order to pop one card on the field. So it's basically like Alpha and Guan Yu. You know, a big monster that comes out and can beat over something by battle and destroy one of them. However, it has to tribute itself to do that. Alpha can bounce a card while also coming out on the field. Like it's a +1 in card advantage. Guan Yu is also a +1 in card advantage. He can destroy a card and then still just destroy something by battle. Whereas Pankratops cannot do either of those things. He has to tribute himself in order to come out, unless you're playing a Pankratops, a Dino Wrestler deck, which no one does because Dino Wrestlers suck. However, it's a quick effect. And because it's a quick effect, it's an S tier. Like, it is so much better than Alpha and Guan Yu that it's not even close. In fact, it's probably one of the best cards like ever made. Like, Pankratops is so good that it's kind of crazy. Which is hilarious because there's two other cards similar to it, and the only difference is that they don't have quick effects. But that quick effect is like the difference between everything. Quick effects are just so good. Plus, you know, it can also destroy something by battle, then quick effect destroy something else. And it targets anything and not just monsters, so it also gets rid of Backrow. Yeah, bypasses skill drain too. Next up, we have Cosmic Cyclone. This has been seen a lot more play because of beat comp protecting Mystic Mine. We'll put this one in B tier. It's a decent going second card. Better than MST. It gets past protection because it banishes one card instead of destroying it. Next up, we have Luna. Luna, I forget her effects, actually. Let me look them up real quick. Let's see. Luna. When this card is normal summoned, add a spellcaster monster with 1850 attack from your deck to your hand. Oh, that's good, but you're probably not going to be using that if you're using it as a going second tool. Once per turn, quick effect, you can target one face-up monster your opponent controls. Your opponent can send one card with that monster's name from their deck or extra deck to the graveyard to negate this effect. Otherwise, return both this card and that monster to the hand. Okay, so it's basically a quick effect Neospatian Grand Mole that targets. And if you combine it with a Kaiju, you can just get your Kaijus back. Whoa, riveting. We'll put it in D tier. It's alright. It's probably not better than, actually, Visuda is good. Like, I have all of these cards in D tier, but I think Visuda is better than so many of them. Nah, we'll leave it. This is fine. It's all good. Next up, we have Brain Control. Pay 800 life points. Steal one of your opponent's monsters until the end of the turn, as long as that monster can be normal summoned or set. So no extra deck monsters, which makes it garbage. D tier. Visuda actually saw meta play though. Saw meta play. Did it stop seeing meta play? We can move the Visuda up to C tier. Why not? It should be at least up here with Eater of Millions and Guan Yu and Serpentron. Next up, we have Night Beam. Night Beam has the effect to destroy one face-down spell or trap card. However, your opponent cannot activate the targeted monster in response to Night Beam. So it's spell speed 4 for that one singular card. The way your opponent can get around it is just activating anything else in response. It actually saw some competitive play in order to get rid of Dimensional Prison. Yeah, the DZ special. I'll put this one in C tier just because it is slightly better than MST. Because Dimensional Prison, I believe is what it's called, is so oppressive as a floodgate. Where basically what it does is you call one extra deck type of monster except for links, and your opponent can't special summon them or activate the effects of those cards for the rest of the turn. So if your opponent is playing something like Despia where they only fusion summon, you can just lock your opponent out of all fusion cards for the turn. Is it Dimensional Barrier? Yeah, I think that's what it's called. And this is an out to Dimensional Barrier, and everybody's playing Barrier. So this could be the difference between winning or losing. If your opponent doesn't just shotgun it during the draw phase because it's a spell speed 1 effect. And it doesn't negate. It's like a preemptive thing. It's not that great. But we'll put it in C tier as a joke. Actually, I'll put it in D tier. It's alright. It's kind of easy to play around, to be honest. Next up, we have Festus Fox de Fucunity. This card has the effect where it can special summon itself from your hand if your opponent special summons a monster from the deck. And also, when this card is summoned, you can choose one card your opponent controls and special summon a monster from your deck that has the same attribute as that monster. However, it needs to have its attack equal to its defense. So, this card can be used in order to bring out Barrier Statue of the Torrents. if your opponent brings out Crystal and Hauki Fibrex. And if you bring out Barrier Statue of the Torrents, your opponent can't do anything if you use this during their first turn. But that requires you to play Barrier Statue in your deck, and actually having this in your hand. So we'll put this one in D tier as well. It's a neat tech option, but it requires garnets that aren't very useful. Yeah, it's a Barrier Statue Searcher, but it's very dependent on what attributes your opponent has. So if you just play every single Barrier Statue in your deck, you can summon them. Next up, we have the 3000 attack Kaiju. I'll put this one in D tier too. Nobody plays it. Underworld Goddess. Ooh, this one's good. It requires 4+ effect monsters as materials. It's one of the very few Link 5 monsters, and you can use one effect monster your opponent controls as one of its materials. And monsters that are used as materials for a summon, kind of get around a lot of protection effects. So you can get rid of DPE with this card, or, something that's immune to monsters. It's basically a Kaiju that you can put in your extra deck. However, since it requires 5 cards, well, 4 of yours and 1 of your opponent's, 4 monsters in order to out 1 of your opponent's cards, which is pretty good. We'll put it next to the Kaiju in A tier. It's basically a going second card that you can put in your extra deck. If you look at all the cards on this going second list, they're all main deck cards. The fact that it's an extra deck card is such a boon to its playability that it's kind of crazy. Kind of like how Pankratops' effect is technically not better than Alpha or Guan Yun, but because it's a quick effect, it's like S tier. Like the other two are garbage in comparison. Lastly, we have Interrupted Kaiju Slumber. This card destroys all cards on the field, all monsters, I mean. Then it special summons 2 Kaijus from your deck with different names, one to your opponent's side of the field and one to your side of the field, and both of those Kaijus gain a lingering effect where they must attack and they can't change their battle position. So this card can be stopped by Ash Blossom, which is one of the most played cantraps in the game, which immediately devalues it somewhat because it technically special summons from the deck. Just because a card can be negated doesn't mean it's bad though, but it also requires you to play at least 2 unique Kaijus and to not draw into any of them. So you have to play a pretty significant amount of Kaijus in order to use it. And usually when you play Kaijus, you don't want to play like more than 3. And if you play only 3 with this card, there's a chance you won't be able to use it. However, it does have an effect while it's in the graveyard. You can banish it to add a Kaiju from your deck to your hand. So not only is it a dark hole that summons you a free card, but it also searches on your next turn, which is actually good. I'll put it in C tier. It's better than D tier at the very least. It's just, in order to play it, you have to invest a lot of Kaijus, and there's a chance you won't be able to activate it, and it's also negated pretty easily. And it's also a Ruling's Nightmare. Like, the card just does so much all at once, and all of it can be negated by cards who have effects that say, if it includes this effect, then you can negate the card, and since it technically includes a whole bunch of different things, it's really easy to negate with everything. It isn't a Ruling's Nightmare? It is a Ruling's Nightmare. There's lots of very specific rulings for this card. You should go look it up. They're interesting. It's very easy to do rulings on. Shut up. Okay, so this is the going second tier list. Normal. Let's save it. There we go. Download the image.